Afternoon. I'm Lorraine Miller, and I'm going to call our meeting to order. It's about 2 minutes after 4, and we want to get started and respect folks' time. And so let me recognize Ms. Kayser. She has some housekeeping issues that she wants to make us all aware of.
Yes, thank you all so much, and we really appreciate you all being here. As you can see, we're doing a little bit of hybrid technology here. We have folks here in person, and then we also have some folks joining us via WebEx. Some of them are presenters, some are city staff, and some of them are a few of your fellow board members. So in order for everyone to see and hear, those of you who are at the table, please be sure to turn your mic on before you speak. You just press the button and it'll turn green, and then it will be on. We're also live streaming our meeting today, so cable is picking it up, and that's the only way they'll be able to hear you. And then we do have a couple of other cameras we're trying to get set up so that the folks that are away, that are on video, in order for them to see you all at the table, we'll have a camera set up here shortly that will kind of give them a picture of the table. And then for those that are coming to present, so it's not just a disembodied voice for the folks on video, there'll be a camera that will show show that person that's at the podium. So those are just a few things, and we really appreciate you all being here, and you'll get to hear from me again just in a few minutes. So, but thank you. Just remember those microphones.
Okay, super duper. Ms. Kayser, can we take our mask off when we're speaking, or should we just keep them on and be muttered?
Yes, you can as you're speaking, because you all have the plexiglass dividers, so you can certainly do that if you're comfortable doing it. And it does make it easier to hear, and the recording comes a little more clear. So, and then if you're not speaking, if you want to put it back on, you certainly can.
Great, thank you. So again, I'm Lorraine Miller, and I see all these smiling faces as we're eager to get going. First of all, I want to thank the mayor in her absence and our council members for bestowing a lot of trust on each of us as task force members as we take on this awesome responsibility. I believe as a task force, we are up to the job and eager to represent the residents of Fort Worth. I think we can mutually agree on that. May I say that I am pleased that each of you have chosen to join us, even by WebEx. Hi, Tracy. Hi, Bill. Bill and I share something in common that we're not going to talk about in public, but we glad to meet each of you and looking forward to working together. This gives us an opportunity to put a face on the name as we begin this 7-month journey together. Mayor, I just said thank you for appointing us and getting us rolling here.
I appreciate you all serving.
Great. And I want to thank the city staff as a kind of a lifelong staffer. I appreciate everything that staff do to facilitate these things. It's we come and sit, and they make sure that we're accommodated. So thank you, staff, for making the arrangements so that we're social distancing and it's possible for us to carry on our work in this pandemic. I've had the opportunity to chat with most of the task force members beforehand, and I hope that there are some items that we can mutually agree on. And let me just run through them real quickly as part of my little opening salvo that hopefully will set the tone for what we are about to do. First, I think as we begin our work that I hope that we would treat each other's opinions with the utmost respect and be transparent in our deliberations, that we take on this responsibility to learn. Nobody knows everything about anything, and we're all learning together, and we represent the residents of our city fairly and with transparency. I'd hope that we would approach our deliberations, that we kind of put at bay our concerns about any single district and focus on what may be in the best interests of achieving fair and equitable representation for all of the residents of Fort Worth. And lastly, I'd hope task force and colleagues that we make a concerted effort to engage our fellow residents in this process, that we make an effort to hear from all of the voices, whether they be conservative or progressive or middle of the road or no road. We will not all agree on everything, but as a task force, I hope that each of us works to make sure that we've done everything we can to educate the residents about this process and ensure their voices are heard. I'll be open to any suggestions from any task member, and I welcome your input at any time. With that, my colleagues, may I ask that each of the task force members just take a minute to introduce yourselves and offer any opening remarks. And let's start with our illustrious former council member, Bert Williams. Turn your mic on, Bert.
Thank you very much, Ms. Miller. And to all of you, I'm just Bert Williams. I've been active in quite a few things around here through the years. I was a coach at one time, and I was on the city council at one time, chairman of DFW Airport Board at one time, chairman of North Central Texas Council of Governments at one time. So I've just been kind of involved, period. And it's a pleasure to be asked really to serve on this. And I'm hoping that to follow up on what Ms. Miller said, I guess we'll talk about these things later on, but I would like to follow up on, but that's who I am. Been around here a long time, hope to be around here still a long time. So I appreciate being with you. Hope you all look very nice, and you look like you are very good people. I'll put it like that. And that you're really here for the same purpose as I am, and that's to try to do the best thing for our city. And that's what the goal is. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. My name is Teresa Ayala. Teresa is my first name. And I'm just so happy to be here. Thank you very much for the opportunity to serve. I love this city, just absolutely love the city. And I'm a lifelong resident of Fort Worth. Grew up in Diamond Hill, which is north of Fort Worth here. And I currently serve as the Vice President of the Board of Trustees for Tarrant County College. I serve on the Reed Fort Worth Executive Council and the Trinity Metro Board, and I'm looking forward to working with all of you. I think that this says a lot about our city, that we're engaged and we're collaborating together to improve our city for our citizens and our residents. So thank you for the opportunity.
Ms. Kennedy?
Hi, I'm Linda Kennedy, and I'm here representing District 6. I'm a lifelong Texan, but I've only been in Fort Worth for 17 years. I'm a graduate of UT Arlington, a former teacher, and I'm very involved in my local neighborhood, as well as a member of several nonprofit boards, mostly dealing with children and education. And I'm very interested in how equity and diversity help to raise the level for everyone in our community. And that's why I wanted to be involved in redistricting for our city.
Thank you, ma'am. My name is Tony DeVito. I am here from District 7, resident of Fort Worth now for 14 years, one of many refugees from California that have landed in this area. Happy to be here, happy to serve on it. Hope I do well, and I appreciate the efforts of all the task force members. Thank you.
Excuse me. Kent Bradshaw. I lived in Fort Worth most of my life. Grew up in here in Aledo. I'm a member of District 9, and I really just reflect, some of the comments that you made. I'm here to, let's make sure that the citizens are put first, and that, that we put together districts that reflect, the growing and changing needs of Fort Worth. So thank you.
I want to thank our Chairwoman Lorraine Miller for already starting out being so inclusive and understanding of the diverse viewpoints on this task force. Fort Worth really is at a crossroads. We are a wonderful city, but it is also a very diverse city. And what I love about Fort Worth is how we all roll up our sleeves and come together. And as Fort Worth has grown, we just want to remind our group that, in 1980, I believe our population was maybe in the 400,000s or maybe 385,000. By 1990, we were maybe over 400,000. Then by the 2000, over 500,000. Then by 2010, it's 700,000. Then by 2020, we'll be over 1 million. So we've stayed at 8 single-member districts. Voters in 2016 voted to go to 10 single-member districts, and we have a wonderful council. I was privileged to serve on the city council for 12 years, worked with outstanding council members, 2 wonderful mayors. It was truly one of the greatest honors of my life. And now as we move forward, and as we go to this 10-1, and this task force is charged with criteria, I want to reiterate what other task force members have said. Let us respect the wonderful diversity of Fort Worth. Let us be fair that every community of interest has a voice in the redistricting process, and let us all come together in a true, unique Fort Worth fashion. I think Fort Worth is a big city, but what makes it different than any other big city in America is that we have a small town feel. I like to say that Fort Worth is 1 degree of separation, right? We all know someone that knows someone, and I grew up on the north side, and as Teresa knows, I'm from I have family in Diamond Hill, as Bert knows. I went to Poly High School. So everybody in Fort Worth knows somebody that knows you, and I think if we keep that in mind, we'll come up with the right result. And as we go forward, I'm just so honored to be here with you. All of you are talented and accomplished individuals that really have the best interests of Fort Worth at heart, and I look forward to coming up with recommendations to our city council that will guide them in the best possible decision for our city, because I really do believe that Fort Worth is one of the great cities in America and just has a special sense to it that I really haven't felt anywhere else, right? It's just so beautiful. So I'm honored to be here with you, and I look forward to working with each and every one of you. And like I always say, and Teresa and the mayor have heard me, and Lorraine, God bless you and God bless Fort Worth. Thank you.
Well, my name is Graham Norris. I'm from Fort Worth, born and raised here, and I'm so excited to be a part of this important work. I'm a former prosecutor, worked for the district attorney's office here in town, and am in private practice now. And like many of you have said, I love Fort Worth, and this is a really important project, so I'm honored to be a part of it. Can't wait to get to work.
We have members on that are joining us by WebEx.
Actually, there's 3.
Tracy Scott and Bill Shore. Mm-hmm. So Tracy, why don't you go first and introduce yourself, and if you have any opening remarks.
Okay. Well, hi, everyone. Can't see you all well enough, but good to see those that I do know. My name is Tracy Scott. I've been here in Fort Worth for 10 years. I'm a former member of city staff. I'm looking forward to this process. In the 10 years that I've been here, Fort Worth has really grown, and it's been really an exciting journey to watch small town Fort Worth grow into, I guess we can say, Middletown Fort Worth at this point. But I look forward to this process and working with you all, and thank you for the invitation. I'm also representing District 8.
Bill?
Yes, my name is Bill Shore. I grew up in Fort Worth. I've lived in many Fort Worth neighborhoods, both on the south side and now on the west side. So I've been in South Hills, Tanglewood, University Place, Berkeley, and now Crestwood. I'm a lawyer by trade. I've been a lawyer for, 47 years. And during most of my career, I have not been involved in a lot of community activities. But when I moved back to Fort Worth in 2008, I became very active in my neighborhood association, and I have become familiar with many of the different city operations. And I appreciate all you who are past and present members of staff and who have served your city as elected representatives. I am passionately committed to diversity and the fair representation of all citizens. And I say passionate, as you get to know me better, you will see that I get to be pretty animated about my beliefs and my passions, but I will try to behave myself. And I think we will all do a fantastic job working together and in the best interest of all of our citizens. So I'm looking forward to working with all of you.
Great, thank you. Mr. Allen, Craig Allen?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Craig Allen. I live in the northern part of Fort Worth. My colleagues here at TCU like to suggest that I'm in southern Oklahoma, but truly I'm just up in the Heritage Development off of I-35. I'm part of the Keller Independent School District Board of Trustees. I served 3 terms, took a couple years off, and rejoined the board a year ago. Kerry Moon asked me if I'd be interested in serving, and I told him this sounded like a great opportunity. I got to be a part of the 2010 Leadership Fort Worth group and learned a lot about Fort Worth. I moved here in 2005 to work at TCU. Absolutely love the city, as many of you have mentioned, and look forward to being a part of this.
Great, thank you. I neglected to introduce myself besides Lorraine Miller. I was born and raised here in Fort Worth, and I live now in the historic South Side, the Evans-Rosedale corridor. I'm very active in my neighborhood association, the historic South Side Neighborhood Association. And I've been, let's say I'm a retired federal employee of 34 years. I lived in Washington for more than I can say grace over, but I came back to my roots, and I learned and knew I had to come home. So with that, I think I'm looking forward to this. I think it's going to be fun. It's going to be intellectually stimulating. And at this point, speaking of intellectually stimulating, I'd like to introduce our mayor of Fort Worth. Mayor Price, will you come and give us some remarks? Okay.
I never stand up here. I'm always back there. So it's an odd prospect to be at this end. I see Councilwoman Gina Bivens up on there laughing at me. So Gina is observing this afternoon too. Thank you all for agreeing to do this, and particularly Lorraine, thank you for chairing this. And it won't be easy work, but it will be very rewarding work, and it's critical to the future of Fort Worth. I want to take just a minute and talk to you a little bit about what's expected and what council is looking for from y'all and the process itself. Fernando Costa and his team, and you've met Fernando, our assistant ACM, will be heading this up for the staff and for the city and for council. But I know you're all very committed to your neighborhoods and your community, or you wouldn't have agreed to do this. And so many of you we've had on other committees, and thank you for that work, and thank you for agreeing to this. You know, by the end of this month, the U.S. Census Bureau will have finished their census count. They will have finished the door-to-door process, the mail process, everything, and it'll go back to Washington. And this has been the most challenging of all the census counts. With the pandemic, it's been very hard. And as you know, the census is so critical to the future of the city and the future of this country. It's education dollars. It's our HUD dollars that come for housing, for homeless. It's part of our roads, our rail system. It touches nearly everything that the city does, and it's allocated from the census. We've made a strong, strong effort with a complete count committee to assure that everyone gets counted. If you know anyone that hasn't been counted, or if you just think somebody might have, send them a message in the next few days and say, you have to be counted. It's a very private process. It's not shared with anyone. Only the Census Bureau gets the data. Then we get the numbers back is all. So no one should be afraid to be counted. By next August, the Census Bureau will provide us with, about a year away, 11 months, with the data that we will use to redraw council boundaries and add 2 new seats, as Sal mentioned. Sal and I were both here on council in 2011 and 2012 when we redistricted. And we can tell you from firsthand, it's not always going to be exactly the way you think it is, but everybody will do as Lorraine said and respect each other and feel free to voice your opinions, but you'll still walk away as friends. And it will get done and it'll be great. So the summer of 2022 is when candidates must establish their residency. They don't file till January of 23, but they have to establish their residency in a district to be eligible to run by summer of 2022. So we want to have 10 well-drawn, geographically cohesive districts with roughly equal population in those 10 districts by that time. And it's a big task that y'all will face and mayor and council will face also. So your actual charge is to learn everything you can about the legal, administrative, and technical aspects of redistricting. And we'll have experts here to help you with that. To figure out how Fort Worth and other cities have redrawn their boundaries in the past. You'll get a history on what we've done, and you'll get some background on what other cities have also done. But remember, this is Fort Worth, and we are, as several of you said, a unique city, and we want it to reflect us. You will be advised on the criteria and the procedures, and then in turn, you will advise council on what is appropriate criteria and procedures for us to continue to use as we draw those boundaries. We want you to complete your work and give us a final report by March of next year. That fits our timing. But by December of this year, before you go out and hold public meetings, council would ask, and I would too, that you provide an interim report, just kind of a basic outline of what you've been doing the last few months to council. You can have Ms. Miller come and present, or you can all come, or you can provide it to us in writing. But it'll give us a nice basis before you start out in public to at least say, yeah, we know where they're going. We've had a chance to look at all this. You may want to test your criteria on this. You won't be drawing the actual maps, but you will be a part of it. But you will have a chance to test population estimates in certain areas on sample maps, and staff will educate you on how to use those sample maps. Last time we did this, we allowed anyone that wanted to, and we will this time too, to submit maps to us, to submit drawings. Of course, clearly yours with the work that you have will carry an awful lot of weight. You'll be well qualified, you are well qualified to take on this work, and your diversity, your backgrounds, and particularly your love for this community will make it really beneficial. Lorraine has the skills to bring everyone to the table. I know she does. And if not, she'll bring out Mama Bear and make you behave, right, Lorraine? I asked her a couple of months ago if you would chair this committee, and she was curious about what it was going to be, but mostly her concern was, would council take this report and just put it on the shelf? And I promised her, and I will promise you, we will not. You will be a major piece of this as we move forward. The concern is very understandable because it does happen occasionally, but not on something that's important. This must be something that every citizen of Fort Worth feels like they can be heard on. And you're representing you're representing all the citizens of Fort Worth, not just the district you're appointed from, but all of our diverse population. We want you to complete your work by March of next year, and then council will begin redistricting process in August. And when we begin, we will ask you to join us at a joint work session that's not a council meeting, but just a full, probably at least half day, if not a full day session with your group and council to talk about the criteria, to talk about the process, to talk about any procedures and recommendations that you might have. And then as we move forward, you will be called again to come maybe individually to look at this area, or maybe as a group to look at that area. It's a new process because we are adding 2 seats. That makes it a little bit different for us. And because of the growth that we've had in the last 10 years. I know together we will come up with a product that will be not only representative of everyone, but certainly not every group is going to be happy, but it will be reflective of who Fort Worth is. And we are an incredibly diverse, welcoming, and loving community. And I want it to be fair and equitable for everyone who calls Fort Worth home. And everyone who is coming in should understand that Fort Worth is doing this the right way. So thank you for helping council and the mayor get this process right. I know we can count on you. You wouldn't have been selected if we didn't know you could do this job well. And to those of you who are virtual, thank you for being there, and hopefully we'll see you here before long. I don't know about y'all, but I've grown weary of Zoom meetings. But I understand we have to do this safely, and it's a long way down from the far north part too, and some people just can't be here. So at least, thank goodness, in 2020 we have that option of using Zoom. Any questions for me? Lorraine, they're all yours.
We appreciate you. I think you've set the tone for our deliberations here, and that's why you're a mayor. You get paid the big dollars.
Yeah, big dollars.
Yeah.
If you don't know, people say that all the time and we never answer it, but Sal can tell you, the mayor makes $29,000 a year.
And council members $25,000.
And council members make $25,000.
Yes.
If you were at the meeting.
And then 25,000. Yeah. So
but
you do it for the love of the city.
Like all of you, as Sal said, no one at the table on Tuesdays does this. Certainly not me nor my council members does it for money. You do it because you care about your community, just as you are.
Absolutely.
And that's why you're here.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank y'all.
For love and country. Councilman Bivens, you just want to say howdy. We appreciate you joining in and spying on us.
I will say howdy, and what I hope is that you all can demystify this process so that people feel good, and thank you for your service.
Groovy smoothie. Thank you. So, colleagues, we have 2 people here that I think we're going to have to pay attention to. One is the Assistant City Manager, Fernando Costa, and 2 is Mary Kayser, the City Secretary. These folks are going to be in us, on us, around us, and guiding us. So at this point, let's recognize Ms. Kayser, and she's going to talk to us about the Open Meetings Act. Give us some training. Thank you, Ms. Kayser.
Actually, what I'm going to do is remind you all that as members of the task force, you will need to complete some open meetings training. It's provided through the Attorney General's office. It's online training. I will provide that link to you, and you have some time to get that done, and I'll give you that deadline date. For those of you that have either served on council or one of our other boards and commissions, if you have already done this training, then you do not have to do it again. So bonus points for you. And if I have a copy of your certificate, that will be all I need. So, but I'll be sending that link out to you, and you will just during that training learn about the Open Meetings Act and all of the requirements for an open meeting. And some of them you can see here in this room today. We are all using our microphones. We're recording this meeting. There's an agenda, and you'll follow the agenda and only discuss and act on items that are listed on your agenda. But there is an opportunity for you all to provide suggestions for future agenda items in case something comes up and you need to talk about it later. The other issue is we are live streaming this meeting right now. So some people have joined us in the meeting, but then for those who are not able to and want to watch it later, it will also be available to them. And that is all part of the Texas Open Meetings Act. And so we know Sarah Fullenwider, our city attorney, is here and can always advise us if we have, if we're wandering off the open meetings trail. And we try very hard to keep you all from doing that. And but if you have any questions, but I will send that link out to you along with an electronic copy of all of the presentations and handouts from today. So you'll be seeing an email from me. And for those of you who are here and did park in the garage and need your parking pass, come see me after the meeting. I have those for you. So.
Great. Ms. Kayser, do you
Yes.
have all the necessary information, contact information from each of us?
Yes, I do. I do. And if I'm missing anything when I email you, I'll just ask you for that as well. But I have emails for everyone because I was able to send you all out the invite for today. So, yes, yes, we do appreciate you all being here.
Great. Turn your mic on.
I just went right ahead and parked where there were council people, and I told them that people that I was parking there. So if I have to pay, I'll pay, but whatever we need to do, but I want to let you know. Okay.
Mr. Fernando Costa is the, I euphemistically called him the Godfather, but.
That's not my official title.
No, that's your official title. Mr. Costa.
Thank you very much, Chairwoman Miller. And welcome, folks. So we're delighted. We've been looking forward to this day for a long time, and I had a chance to speak with most, if not all of you, by phone, and we're really thrilled that folks with your level of experience and knowledge, and some of you are already truly experts in redistricting. You've been through redistricting once or twice or even more, but you're all well qualified. In fact, this is, I'm sure, and this is not intended to be any kind of gratuitous remark, you're among the best qualified task forces that any of us on city staff have ever had the pleasure of working with. So we're very much looking forward to working with you on a very exciting and important effort to recommend appropriate criteria and procedures by which the City Council, with your support, will be able to redraw our district boundaries and add 2 new council districts in advance of the 2023 election. So that's a big task, and we have staff who are eager and ready to help you in performing that work. And I'd like to take just a moment to make sure you know who is available to provide that support for you. You've already met Mary Kayser. Ms. Kayser is at the top of her profession, and that's not an exaggeration. She was recently president of the International Association of Municipal Clerks. Now that's no small feat, and she manages to perform that kind of professional service while performing splendidly as our city secretary. Her job is like that of a baseball umpire. If you don't notice the umpire, you're doing a great job. And Ms. Miller, you know that. You know that because you've humbly not talked about what you've done in your career, but you've done that kind of work at a different scale, and you know you don't want to be noticed. And that's Mary Kayser to a T. You've already been introduced to Sarah Fulton-Whiter, city attorney, but the deputy city attorney will be staffing this effort, and that's Miss Leann Guzman, who's been with the city a long time, and I can tell you there's none better than Leann Guzman at taking complex legal issues and condensing them to forms that anyone can understand. And she knows how to get right to the nub of a problem and find solutions. She's not about throwing impediments in our way. She's about solving problems. So you've got the best to support you. We've got other outstanding staff with us, and let me mention a couple of folks from the city, from the mayor's office. I don't know if they're still here. Chelsea Adler, Whitney Rodriguez. It's hard to recognize folks with masks now, but Whitney, if you'd stand so everyone can see you. Thanks, Whitney. Happy that you're here. Deputy Chief of Staff to the mayor and council. So she'll be following us. Michelle Goots is our Director of Communications and Public Engagement. Several of you, including Ms. Miller and and Mayor Price have already talked about the importance of engaging our residents in this process. This is not just about some group of experts at City Hall. This is about the community being involved. Sal Espino talked about that. Nobody knows community engagement better than Sal. That's going to make a big difference in our success. Getting the community involved, getting the community to have a sense of ownership about these criteria and procedures, and eventually about the district boundaries, to be sure they really reflect what's genuine about Fort Worth. So you'll get to know Michelle, particularly, well, throughout the whole process, but particularly as we get into public meetings, because we'll want to have a series of public meetings, and we can hold them in many different ways. And of course, we're particularly challenged right now with the coronavirus and the need to hold these kinds of complex meetings in person, remotely as well. So we'll need to think very carefully, depending on what the public health situation is, about how we engage the public meaningfully, constructively, proactively, while observing public health protocols. So that's a big challenge, and Michelle is up to it. I have to tell you, we stand in awe of what staff has done during this pandemic to engage citizens. Not much has slowed down in that respect. In fact, in some ways, citizens are better engaged now during the pandemic than they were before. And that's a tribute to our fine staff. So Michelle Goot. Catherine Huckabee, I believe, is on the screen. Catherine is another, she's in charge of community engagement, works with many neighborhood organizations throughout Fort Worth. And she won't brag about herself, but she is now the president of Neighborhoods USA, another national organization headed by someone from Fort Worth. So Catherine, she's bringing the national conference to Fort Worth, I think, next spring. And we hope it'll be here in person next May. So you'll get to work with Catherine. Michelle Swindle, I think, is here. Yes, Michelle is with our Information Technology IT department. She is our GIS manager. GIS is Geographic Information Systems. So she's very good at redistricting, and will help you to get your hands on the software from ESRI, our vendor, so that you can draw sample council district maps and test the criteria. Because the proof is in the pudding. You can talk about criteria in the abstract, but until you actually get your fingers on the keyboard and start drawing these maps yourself, which you can, and we'll show you how to do it, you'll be able to see how these criteria really work. And you'll in fact, I won't try to tell you how it works. You'll see it in the demonstration. But it's almost magical how you can see the geography and the statistical data aligning instantly through the use of this software. Zach Hutchison is with us from Planning and Data Analytics, a senior planner in that department, and he'll be working with Michelle Swindle in providing you with technical support. And on the screen is Christina Brooks. There's Christina over at the left second row. Christina, some of you have met already. She is our Director of Diversity and Inclusion, and she is out in the community every day helping us to build a more equitable community. She moved to Fort Worth just a few months ago, late last year, from South Bend, Indiana, and where she was a diversity inclusion advisor to Mayor Pete Buttigieg, and has already made a big impact on Fort Worth. And she's the only one of our staff members who doesn't have any specific responsibilities, which means that she could get into all kinds of trouble if we turn her loose. But her main job is to make sure that everything we do respects diversity and inclusion, that everything we do is inclusive of everyone, those without a voice, those who are not well engaged, to make sure that we don't do anything as a result of implicit bias that prevents people from participating meaningfully in this process. So that's a big job that Christina will bring. And there are other staff who are present. I apologize for not mentioning everybody, but those are the key folks who are assigned specifically to work with the redistricting task force. My job is to give you today a briefing. I was asked, Ms. Miller got in touch with me yesterday and asked me, could I talk a little more about the history of redistricting? I said, happy to do that. Give you a little bit of history, and if there's anything I leave out, Mr. Williams will fill in the blanks, because he's been a big part of that history for a long, long time. And others around the table can add your experiences as well. So a little bit about the history, but also talk with you about the schedule of activities that we anticipate the task force undertaking in the months ahead. And so, with your permission, I will ask, I think Ms. Kayser is going to be advancing the slides for us. So if you could, okay. Next, please. All right, a little history. Fort Worth was founded in what year? All right, Sal. The U.S. Army, of course, established Camp Worth on the banks of the Trinity River in 1849. And it was 24 years later when the city of Fort Worth was actually incorporated. We adopted the city charter, 1873. And it wasn't until 1924 that our current form of government, the council manager form of government, was adopted. And you know how that system works, whereby the council is a policymaking body, the city manager is a professional who oversees all city staff and runs city government on a day-to-day basis. A landmark piece of federal legislation was the Voting Rights Act of 1965. You know about it. We've heard a lot about it in recent weeks with the passing of Congressman John Lewis. I know Ms. Miller knew Congressman Lewis. I happen to have known him in a former life. He was a large part of the reason we have a Voting Rights Act. I'll ask Leann Guzman to tell us more about the Voting Rights Act and what it means and how it affects the conduct of our redistricting task force. It wasn't until 1975, however, that we first established single-member districts for the city of Fort Worth. Before that, we had at-large representation. But single-member districts is a way to be sure that we have fair representation geographically and demographically across Fort Worth. In fact, I was, in doing a little bit of homework, I learned that Fort Worth didn't actually abolish the poll tax until 1975, at the same election at which we created the single-member district. Now, the poll tax had been made illegal years before, but it had stayed on the books. And it wasn't until the 1975 charter election that the poll tax was made illegal, struck from the city charter in Fort Worth. Well, the term redistricting applies to the redrawing of council district boundaries. That occurs after every decennial census of population. And so that has occurred 4 times now in Fort Worth: 1981, 1991, 2001, and 2011. 2011-2012 timeframe. And so coming up will be only the 5th time that we will have undertaken redistricting after a decennial census in Fort Worth. Okay, next slide, please. So bringing us closer to the present day, I'll ask Ms. Guzman again to tell us about this Supreme Court decision out of Memphis, Tennessee, that invalidated certain provisions of the Voting Rights Act as they pertain to what we call pre-clearance by the U.S. Justice Department. And Ms. Guzman will tell us more about that. In in 2016, and some of you were part of this effort, Mr. Williams served on the Charter Review Task Force. I think Dion Bagsby, the late, great Dion Bagsby, chaired that task force. I think, Mr. Williams, you may have been the vice chair of that Charter Review Task Force, and you recommended that we expand the city council to create 2 new districts. That was probably the most contentious of all the recommendations you made, and it passed. The voters passed it. And so we'll be moving from an 8+1 system to a 10+1. And that's going to require a lot of adjustment in city government. So that was 2016. In 2018, we received the final report of the Task Force on Race and Culture. And their biggest recommendations revolved around civilian oversight of law enforcement. But they made another big recommendation about creating an independent redistricting commission, similar to what Austin has done. Now, that was the subject of much debate, and ultimately the city council decided that they did not wish to move in that direction. They wanted to retain the authority to redraw boundaries themselves with your support, but they wanted to create a task force that would advise them on the criteria and procedures. They made that decision in 2019. In 2020, of course, COVID-19 came to our shores and caused what is now a 7-month delay, first time in the whole history of our country that the census has been delayed in this way, 7 months. So we won't actually get the census results at the block level until the end of July, 1st of August of 2021. So you'll be done with your formal work well before the census results are available, but we'll bring you back, as Mayor Price indicated, as we launch the actual redistricting process in August of 2021. We'll talk a little more about that schedule. And it was just on August 4th of this year that the council adopted a resolution appointing your redistricting task force. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so a quick look back, and we won't go into detail right now, but here is a list of the 10 criteria. You have copies of it at your seats, and we'll provide this same information to you electronically afterwards so you can use it as you wish. These are the 10 criteria that the City Council adopted by resolution in June of 2011 for use in redistricting leading up to the 2013 municipal election. And we'll talk about each one of these criteria in much greater detail as you move into your work. If you have any questions now, of course, we're happy to answer them, but you can take a quick look at the criteria now. You'll be spending a lot of time discussing these 10 and other potential criteria. You're not bound to adopt these 10. You may adopt, in fact, we expect you to take a fresh look at all possible criteria. What you recommend may include some of these 10, possibly even all 10 of the criteria. You may have others, you may have fewer. There's no magic number of criteria. As you study what other cities have done, you will find that there are several of these criteria that come up again and again, in part because the law requires that you do certain things to provide equal treatment, equal protection under the law. And so you'll see some of these criteria coming up again and again, but some are highly discretionary. So you don't have to adopt these 10. You can decide whatever you think is best for Fort Worth. Don't feel compelled to follow anybody else's lead. Do what is right for Fort Worth, and at the same time is legally defensible and inappropriate for our community. Next slide, please. And here's a quick look at the process that we followed back in 2012 on redistricting. Now, as Ms. Guzman will explain, we're not bound by the same legal procedures today that we were in 2012. And so we probably will not follow this same kind of process in exactly the same way. When we meet in October, we'd like to bring to you representatives from at least a couple of other cities that have done things differently by means of WebEx. So you can broaden your thinking, not necessarily emulate what they've done, but broaden your thinking about different possibilities for redistricting criteria and procedures. So these are just the procedures that Fort Worth used in 2012. Again, we don't have to do in the future what we've done in the past. Next slide, please. Okay, and I've already mentioned the 2016 charter amendment, which expanded the council from 8 single-member to 10 single-member districts. And it'll be effective after the 2020 census results are released in advance of the 2023 municipal election. Okay, next slide. And I've already mentioned the Task Force on Race and Culture and their recommendation in 2018. Even though we may not be following their advice to the letter in creating an independent redistricting commission, we still want to honor the goal, the same goal that they put in front of us, and that's to create districts that provide the best opportunities to elect council members who reflect the diverse population of the city. One of the observations that the Task Force on Race and Culture made, for example, was that the city of Fort Worth will have a population of roughly 900,000 in the 2020 census. We'll know, we don't know, but we'll find out soon enough. And we'll, as Mr. Spino indicated, we'll cross the 1 million mark in the next few years. The population of Fort Worth today is close to 40% Hispanic or Latino. And yet you can count on the fingers of one hand, Sal, and Sal is one of them, the number of Latinos who have ever served on the city council in Fort Worth history. Now, the Task Force on Race and Culture said, wait a minute, if 40% of the population is Hispanic, shouldn't 40% of the city council be Hispanic? Like 5 out of 11 or 4 out of the 10 who are serving from single-member districts. And so that was a little startling to hear, going from no more than 1 Hispanic ever serving at one time in the council to 4. Well, if you did it straight by the numbers, that's what you would get. Now, you have to take into account the fact that not 40% of the voting age population is necessarily Hispanic, or 40% of the registered voters are not necessarily Hispanic, or not 40% of the citizens who actually vote in elections are Hispanic. So you have to take all of that into account in our expectations about what the results of redistricting might actually be. So that's just an example coming from the Task Force on Race and Culture about their thinking on the importance of redistricting toward fair and equitable representation on the city council. Next slide, please. Okay. There we go. All right. And so the city manager, responding to comments from the city council, recommended that we appoint this task force, which we've done, to develop criteria and procedures, as Mayor Price was explaining, to be used in creating council districts for the 2023 election, and to present those criteria and procedures to the city council in March of next year. Okay? And of course, this is an 11-member task force. 8 of you were appointed by individual council members from your respective districts, and the other 3 were appointed by the mayor to ensure diversity of expertise and interests. And so every effort was made by the council members individually and collectively to be sure that this task force is as representative of the population of Fort Worth as it can be. Okay, next slide. And here you see your names. You all know each other now. Okay. And here's the schedule, finally. We're starting today, September 17th, your very first meeting. You've received the task force charge. You'll hear in a moment about the legal basis for redistricting. Shortly thereafter, you'll get to see a demonstration of the redistricting software from ESRI, folks who are on the line. You've heard about Texas Open Meetings Act training. Be sure to do that before our next meeting. Next month, we'd like to bring to you experts from other cities. Ms. Kayser and I have already been in touch with folks from Austin. Austin is unique in Texas, at least to our knowledge, in that they do have an independent redistricting commission. We are not moving in that direction, but we can learn a lot from their experience. And so I anticipate that the vice chair of that commission from Austin will be with us. Had a chance to communicate with him earlier today. And then the other city that we'd like to recommend for you to interview would be San Antonio. San Antonio, another big city in Texas, rather diverse. One of the things they did differently, and again, we're not recommending this, and we're going to ask our law department to advise us, but I don't think they're going to recommend it either. But what they did, which is rather intriguing, was that they turned the whole redistricting process over to outside legal counsel. Outside legal counsel. They got some outside lawyers using the city council's prescribed criteria to draw maps that the outside lawyers would consider to be legally defensible. And then the city council just tweaked their recommended district boundaries, but they already started off with a map that was produced by people outside of city government, with the highest priority being ensuring that those maps were legally defensible. Now, I'm not saying that's the best way to do it. In fact, I don't think it's the best way to do it. But it does ensure that you have folks laying eyes on those maps and actually drafting those maps who have a legal defense in mind as their top priority. So we think you'll find that to be illuminating, even though we don't recommend that we follow that process, if that makes sense. Now, if you tell us, Mr. Costa, that's nuts, we don't want to hear from them, then we won't invite them. But I think you'll find them to be beneficial, just broadening our thinking about different options that we can consider and how different approaches affect the outcome of the redistricting process. So that's October. In November, we'd like for the meeting to be exclusively, or at least primarily, among yourselves. So you can compare notes about what you've been hearing, what you've been discussing, what are the pros and cons of the different options, and come up with some preliminary findings. What have you heard that resonates with you? What conclusions are you beginning to draw from what you've heard in November? And then that would be the basis of your interim report to the City Council. Here's what we've heard, here's what we've learned, here's what we think. These are the preliminary ideas that we'd like to take out to the community. So you would come up with some preliminary ideas, and then the citizens of Fort Worth can begin to criticize those ideas. But at least you have a starting point, and you can hear from the public about what they think regarding your preliminary thoughts, and then you can adjust them accordingly. So the interim report is the first opportunity for the City Council and the public to hear what's on your mind about what's beginning to make sense. So that will be in December. In January, we propose that you have at least 4 public meetings by paired council districts. And we're suggesting that, for example, council districts 2 and 7 on the north side of Fort Worth might be a logical pairing because they have a lot of interests in common for the far north part of Fort Worth. Council districts 5 and 8 have a lot in common on the east side of Fort Worth. They might be paired. Now, ordinarily, and possibly even in January by that time, we could have these meetings in venues that are located geographically around the city. That might work, perhaps not. But if not, we can still have these meetings in such a way that folks from different parts of Fort Worth can participate, and the paired council members can take part and hear from their own constituents in that process. You'll be running the meetings, they'll be your meetings, but we would invite the council members to participate as well, so they can have that level of involvement. So those are the public meetings that we discussed earlier. So at least 4 public meetings we would suggest that you hold. And they'll be well publicized. Michelle Good and her staff will help us in that regard. And then in February, you'd come back, compare notes again about what you've heard from the public, and come up with your final recommendations to the City Council, which you'll present in March according to the schedule that Mayor Price has given to you. Next slide, please. So then you turn it over to the City Council, and the Council does the redistricting process starting in 2021. The election would be in May of next year. And so actually not the current City Council, but the next City Council will actually do the redistricting. Now, if Fort Worth history is any indication, there won't be any large-scale turnover, and most of the folks who are there now will be there next year, but we'll see. That'll all be subject to the May 2021 election. We'll get the block-level census data by the end of July, according to federal law, and then in August, you'll be able to hold that joint work session with the City Council after they come back from their summer break. The Council will then be able to conduct a redistricting process, and this is a very compressed time frame, and we'd actually like to get more time than is shown here on the schedule, but at least we'd like for it to run from August to December, involving community residents in that process. They would follow your recommended criteria and procedures. We would ask the Council, by the way, to adopt a resolution accepting your recommendations after you submit your final report. One of the quirky aspects of this process is the next item, that the Tarrant County Voter Registrar prints voter registration cards with information about the new council districts in December. Now, I think that Ms. Kayser is going to help us to approach county officials and see if they might be able to adjust that time frame in view of the redistricting process that's occurring. But right now, that would be one of the time constraints, December of 2021, tying the redistricting process to the printing of voter registration cards so that they don't have to reprint the cards after we redraw the boundaries. Only makes sense to print the cards once. As Mayor Price indicated, by mid-July, 180 days before the 2023 municipal election, candidates must establish their residency within the new council districts. And then they qualify in mid-January to mid-February of 2023 for the election to be held in May of that year. Okay, next slide. Well, you've heard as much from me as I think you're going to want to hear for a good while, but happy to answer any questions you might have about the process of redistricting before we ask Ms. Guzman to step forward and talk with us about the law.
Now, Fernando, you said the council had decided they were not going to do an independent redistricting commission. Is that totally foreclosed? Like, if we go out to the public and there's overwhelming public sentiment or consensus for that, could that be a recommendation of this task force for the council to consider?
Mr. Espino, you know the answer to that question, but I know why you're asking it. The official answer is the City Council does not wish to consider the creation of an independent redistricting commission. Now, what could happen, Mr. Espino? You know the answer to that question.
Obviously, public sentiment is strong in favor of that. Council could reconsider.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Fernando.
But the council has made it clear to us, and in defense of my job, I want to tell you that the council does not wish to create an independent redistricting commission.
And then my other follow-up on that, Fernando, is on the redistricting criteria. Obviously, the U.S. Supreme Court said that preserving incumbent constituent relations is a factor this task force could consider to eliminate that criteria, right?
Yes, sir, exactly right. Okay. And I'll defer to Ms. Guzman, but that is really one of the pivotal criteria you'll want to consider. Last time, in 2011, the council established one of the criteria. We can bring that back up if we can get back to the list of 10 criteria. There it is, number 10, preserving incumbent constituent relations. That's another way of saying preserving incumbent council members.
What that means to me, Fernando, is if this redistricting task force says, let's draw a fair map without regard to where an incumbent lives in order to draw the fairest map possible for the city of Fort Worth, we could eliminate that criteria.
Exactly right.
That's what I'm saying. 'Cause
exactly
sometimes
right.
when you redraw maps, you could have 2 incumbents in 1 council district. Now, obviously, the council at this point is going to redraw the maps, and they'll give consideration to that item unless this task force says, don't give consideration to
Exactly
that.
right.
Right.
Exactly
Thank you,
right.
Fernando.
Exactly. And you can word that however you want. You can be silent, you can delete it and not address it, or you can say something a little more affirmative about how you don't want the residency of the residents of an incumbent to affect the drawing of a council district boundaries. In fact, that is a large part of the reason to justify the creation of an independent redistricting commission, so that incumbency has absolutely nothing to do with it.
You're trying to draw the best possible map with the fairest criteria. The only other comment I would make is traditionally for criteria 7, right now there's only 1 council district that is outside Loop 820, that's Council District 6. In the past, the city of Fort Worth, city council has always wanted to have a council districts both inside Loop 820 and outside Loop 820, but as the city has grown, obviously there's been growth tremendous growth outside Loop 820, tremendous growth in certain diverse communities all over and inside Loop 820, and so that would probably be another criteria we probably need to have a discussion about, criteria number 7.
That is right on the mark, Mr. Espino. Traditionally, that is correct. Traditionally, and you'll hear a lot more about this, I'm sure, the city council has drawn council districts like spokes on a wheel, radiating out from the center of the city, so that each council district, or at least most council districts, not all, it's not possible probably to have all, but most include a large part of the central city inside Loop 820 and a large part outside the central city. The reason being, and this may not be as easily done in the future if it's possible at all, the council historically has not wanted to pit one part of the city against another, particularly the central city versus peripheral parts of the city. We don't want to go into us versus them kinds of debates. And so Mr. Espino, for example, represented Council District 2, which had a lot of the near north side, but also a lot of far north. And so you couldn't say that Mr. Espino was one or the other. And so that's why the council historically has wanted to have a little bit of both inside and outside the loop in each district, with the exception of District 6, which is outside, and District 9, which is inside. But that will be harder to do with 10 council districts and with the city growing so fast in respect to population and geography. So,
thank you, Fernando.
No, those are excellent comments, Mr. Espino.
Ms. Ayala?
Yes, thank you for the clarification. Are we expected also to prioritize the criteria? Because if we make these recommendations and they choose not to follow them, are there some guidelines that we're going to follow regarding that?
Good question. These criteria were not listed in any order of priority. Now, from a legal standpoint, some are more fundamental than others. So, for example, number 1, approximately equal size, that is a legal requirement. Some of the others are not legally required. In fact, they're totally discretionary. But to answer your question more directly, no, these are not arranged in any kind of priority sequence. That's not to say you couldn't. You could hypothetically, I'm not recommending it, but you could say these are priority A criteria and these are priority B secondary criteria. You could do that. There's no reason why you couldn't, if that's what you think is the best thing to do. Good point.
Members, I really do want us to feel free to, if you've got ideas or things that you want to, for the task force to consider, speak up. Don't sit there and and hold it in and say, well, I wish we had done this or that, at least bring it up and let us, as a body, consider it, okay? Mr. Costa?
Thank you. Oh, yes, sir, Ms. Bradshaw.
So a couple times in this presentation, you brought up the Race and Culture Task Force. I just want to make sure it's out on the table. So after the events that happened with Jacqueline Craig, the public was upset. The mayor and the city council said we need a Race and Culture Task Force.
Yes, sir.
And so
2017.
Right. And so one of the recommendations from all that, I attended some of those meetings. I mean, there were 20 plus people on that.
Yeah, 23-member task force, yes.
They didn't finish it, it was like a year and a half.
About a year and a half, exactly.
Right. And so, this came from the mayor and the city council, this recommendation from a task force put together by them. Did the mayor and city council make comment on why this recommendation was turned down?
The comments that they expressed in public meetings revolved around the understanding that traditionally one of the most important responsibilities of the council members as elected officials is to draw council district boundaries. That was an explanation that the council gave, and that was the basis for their decision. Is it actually one of their main responsibilities? Is that delineated somewhere that's a main responsibility? It's not it is currently a legal responsibility. Now, whether that is philosophically a responsibility that inherently belongs to the elected officials, I think that's a decision for each of us to make on our own.
I guess, and so one of my main things is here we are on another task force, and we're asked to put together some recommendations similar to the Race and Culture Task Force, put their recommendations together. So, if we can have a very open process where the recommendations that we put together are whatever you want to call it, ignored, denied, passed over. If we could get, since they appointed us to do that, we come back, give them things that there's an official comment, made by each city council member. I mean, just so it's transparent, exactly, if they ask you to do something and then they don't follow what you do, there should be a very clear reason.
No doubt. And in fact, that's exactly why Mayor Price made reference to her conversation with Ms. Miller. Ms. Miller said, well, she'll speak for herself. Ms. Miller? No, that's it. As I understand the tale, Ms. Miller told Mayor Price, how do I know that you're going to follow our recommendations? And the mayor said, because I gave you my word. And I will convene a joint work session with this task force so that not only do they adopt the criteria, but they will work with you arm in arm to apply those criteria in the redrawing of maps. Now, we just heard Mayor Price say this afternoon that her intent, and it's not legally binding, but her intent is for you to be a partner with the council in redrawing the maps. That has never happened before. For an outside group, at least to cooperate with the council, because in the past it's been just the council, and not necessarily in the light of day. In fact, I'd probably be remiss if I didn't acknowledge a group that will be making comments to you later today under public presentations about the work they've done. I think we sent you some weeks back a video produced by Citizens for Independent Redistricting, which sets forth it's objectively accurate, but it also reflects their point of view in support of an independent process for those reasons. But the charge of the task force, which is set forth in the resolution creating the task force and reiterated by Mayor Price today, is for you to provide advice on the criteria and procedures not to redraw the boundaries, other than to have the liberty, of course, to prepare sample maps based on the best available population data today. They are not the official census figures. Those won't be available until almost a year from now. But you're providing the criteria and the procedures, not the maps themselves.
Thank you. Teresa, did you want to? You know, in talking to the mayor about this, I must tell you guys, when I broached her to say, why don't we have a work session, an actual work session? She said, sure. I mean, immediately. There was no hesitation on her part. I had wanted it to be memorialized in the resolution that the council originally passed, and we just didn't get it in time. But clearly, because I wanted not only the mayor, but the council members, each of them to be equally bought into this. But she assured me and gave me her word that she was going to work with us as a task force to make sure this happened. So again, my personal concern was that I just hope we didn't do a report that would sit on the shelf and then that we never had an opportunity to engage with the council on what we're going to spend 7 months on this. And so it wasn't worth your time for us to do all of this work and learn all of this for it to do a little report, sit on the shelf, and they go about their business doing whatever they decided to do. And so we want to have concrete input in what they do. And then accountability is another part of it. So, Mr. Williams.
A good friend may probably, I'm on. And the thing that I'm concerned about, this is going to be some work. And it's going to be work, whereas it's going to take our time to actually do this and do a great job. And I'm hoping that we can, as a group, we can get together and say, okay, what is it that we're really trying to accomplish in regards to making this a very good process and also treat everybody in Fort Worth correct. In regards to trying to set these districts up, it's going to be something that we all going to have to look at as far as the numbers are concerned, and also look at the areas and try to make sure that we do a great job for all of our citizens, where they will all understand that we were fair. And that, to me, is what's going to be most important about this whole process. And that's something that we as a group are going to have to come together and say, okay, what are we really trying to come down to and narrow it down, and what we think would be a process that would be good for the citizens of Fort Worth, and also show that we were concerned about doing our job and doing it proper and decent and in order. And if we can actually come to that, because like you said, this is going to be a long time.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be honest with you. I play my golf all the time, and I'm enjoying life. And a lot of you may not believe this, but I am 85 years of age. Be 86 in December. And so what I do, I'm enjoying life. I'm having a good life. And this is going to take a lot of my time. So I really don't want to be wasting no time doing this, and then, like you say, somebody take it and put it on the shelf. And also, we have to get the council people that are there now to understand that when we draw this redistricting map and put it together, that if they feel like, if they we're looking at this, they'll have time to actually change the district where they are. If they want to run, they may have to leave where they stand and go stay somewhere else, excuse me. Because simple reason, we cannot try to draw a redistricting map to satisfy any of the present council people. They have to understand this is not going to be that. This is totally different. And I was just listening to very good conversations and very good thoughtful, and I thank you very much, young man.
Thank you, Mr. Williams.
You're doing a great job, and you've explained it to us, and I'm just hoping that when at our next meeting, when we really sit down and look at the criteria and those things, and I would like to know, when will we be getting the present numbers that we will be working with? When will we be getting those?
You won't get the census figures until, actually, you won't get them officially while you're serving in this capacity. It'll be August of next year, almost a year from now, by the time the census figures are published, because usually the census would be done by now, but because of the pandemic, the whole process was delayed 7 months or prolonged 7 months, and that's why the mayor was making reference to the final stretch toward completing the census count. We're now in the door-to-door phase, and so we're getting a later start this time around than we've ever gotten before. So it'll be August, but by the time you have your joint work session, we'll have those numbers. And so if the council wants to include you in the redistricting process, you'll have the numbers with which to do it.
Great. Colleagues, we have a couple of folks that are, a couple of our members on video. Would any of you have a question or comment? And then after that, we'll go to Ms. Kennedy and then to Mr. Speedo again.
They're shaking their heads no.
Can you guys?
Yeah, Mr. Allen was shaking his head no.
No? Okay. You good?
Okay. Yes.
Ms. Scott, you good?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Shure, you're good?
Yeah, he shook his head.
Good. And Mr. Allen? Okay. I just want to make sure. Great.
I think
Ms. Kennedy? And then Mr. I'm sorry?
I was going to say, I was telling Fernando, I think there's a couple more questions.
Okay. Ms. Kennedy?
I was just going to ask, can we get a copy of the wording of the charge to the task force?
Yes, ma'am. It's in the resolution, which we have sent, I think, but we can resend it.
Make a note and I'll send it when I send
Okay.
The August 4th resolution.
And also, the task force on race and culture, the goal about creating the districts.
Yes.
I know there's more than just the goal. There's.
We can send you their report. They
we
produced
copy
about a 100-page report. We're happy to send that to you, and you can focus on the section that deals with governance and redistricting.
Thank you.
On the city website.
Yes, it is on the website. It is. The Task Force on Race and Culture, Michelle, on the website.
Yeah, my final comment, I'm sorry, back to what our esteemed colleague here, Mr. Williams, indicated. You're right about the census data, but the U.S. Census does provide population estimates, right?
Yes, sir. We do have the...
Don't we have access to that?
We do. We have the American Community Survey, and in fact, in just a few moments after you hear from our law department, we'd like for you to get a demonstration from ESRI, which is the top firm in the country on this kind of work, who will show you how we can use those current estimates to perform redistricting tasks now. So you can do it now. It just can't be official because we won't have the official data, but it'll be a good approximation.
That's what I wanted to make clear, and then I want to back up what Mr. Bradshaw says and what everyone has said. Back when there was a city charter task force, the charter task force came back with several recommendations, and just so we're clear, when it came time to vote on some of those recommendations by the task force that was put before the voters, there were 4 council members that were against several recommendations by the task force of members that council members specifically appointed to that task force. There were 4 council members against 10-1, several council members against council pay, 3-year terms, staggered terms. So Mr. Bradshaw makes an excellent point that if this task force makes a recommendation after citizen input and much hours, it would be nice if the council would follow the task force recommendations of folks that they appointed to the task force. That's just my editorial comment, and I apologize and you'll probably get used to me because I'm not shy about making my opinions known.
Great, Sal.
Everybody loves Salesfino.
Yeah. Looking forward to 7 months of everyone's opinion. Okay, great. Mr. Costa, thank you.
Thank you all so much.
You're very thorough. Now, task force, we're going to have Mrs. Guzman. Mrs. Guzman. Now, Ms. Guzman, you're going to talk about the Voting Rights Act, are you?
The legal basis, that's right, the legal basis for redistricting, which I also helpfully called, why are we here? So if we can get the slides up. I will say the only thing good about following Mr. Costa, who is an excellent speaker, is that he has a chance to say very nice things about you. So thank you, Fernando. I appreciate it. Okay, we can go ahead and go to the next slide. So I'm here to sort of answer the existential question of why are we here? And Fernando did a great job of covering these first three for you already. Fort Worth is a single member district city. And according to the constitutional requirements, the districts must be, and I'm using the term during this presentation called balanced, which means every person's vote in each district counts the same as the person in the next district. One person, one vote. And you've heard enough about the census, so I'll skip that. Now, the first three are things that we've dealt with multiple times before. These next two are different and new. The council is going from 8 single-member districts to 10. That obviously has a big impact on the map. And then secondly, as Fernando alluded to, Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act has been struck down by the Supreme Court. And so that was the section that required all maps in certain areas of the country, Texas included, to be sent to the Department of Justice for what they called pre-clearance, which was sort of kind of this stamp of approval by the Department of Justice that you had met certain requirements and that your map looked pretty good to them. In other words, I'm really, kind of simplifying it, but that's the basic thing. Now, that is no longer required, so we will not have to send any map that comes out of this process to the Department of Justice for pre-clearance. So I mentioned one person, one vote, and the courts have said that the boundaries need to be drawn so that as nearly as practicable, there's equal representation for equal numbers of people. So it's very important that each district have as close as we can get to the same number as all the other districts, and that is total population count, not voter population. That's been determined. So there can be some differentiation between the numbers, and kind of the safe harbor rule is a 10% rule. So as long as the largest district is not 10% more in population than the smallest district, that's been found by the courts to be a fairly safe number to go with. Now, that does not mean that if you are under that threshold that they couldn't find discrimination in how you drew your map. You still have to be careful not to discriminate, but in terms of just pure population, that's a fairly good rule of thumb. Next slide. So there are some things that the courts have found as good reasons to deviate the population numbers between the districts. And those legitimate reasons are called traditional redistricting principles. And I'm going to go over those in a little bit more detail in a minute, but I wanted to go ahead and get that in front of you, that there are some legitimate court-approved reasons why you can have those deviations in population between the districts. So the number one fundamental thing that you cannot do in your map is discriminate. And what you'll often see in maps that do discriminate is certain things that the vernacular has developed that's called packing and cracking. And packing is when you put a large number of minority voters into just a few super concentrated districts, and with the intent and the effect that the voice is diluted. So an example of that was in one of the seminal Supreme Court cases for racial discrimination and gerrymandering, and that's Shaw versus Reno in 1993. This first congressional district in North Carolina, it has actually, since Shaw, been to the Supreme Court 4 more times. They really struggle over there, apparently. But it was already predominantly African American before the 2010 census and before they redistrict. And then when they went to redistrict, they drew the lines to include some additional African American population, so that essentially they were ensuring that that population group were all in the same district, thus diluting the voice. And then cracking is when you split a group across multiple districts so that there's not enough of a group to have a voice. And if we can go to the next slide, I have a graphic that kind of gives you a pictorial depiction of this. So you can see in the upper right-hand corner that the purple is the clear majority. But you can structure your districts such that the green actually have the greater voice. So if you combined 3 cracked districts with 2 packed districts, the green would have the majority vote. So there are some impermissible redistricting factors, and primarily, again, that is using race as a predominant factor for drawing your boundary lines. There is an exception that the courts have allowed, and I won't go too deep into this, but just so you know, if there is a great number of racially polarized voting, so that the minority voice could never have some of the majority voice join them in getting their candidate that they would prefer into office, then if that is a situation, and you have to drill down into the data to figure that out, then it's possible that it would be required in order to meet the Voting Rights Act to create a majority-minority district. That is a possibility, but again, that's very data-driven. You also can't use partisan reasons as a proxy for race in drawing your district lines. The Supreme Court most recently in 2019 backed out of partisan gerrymandering and said we are not going to be involved in the 2 political parties drawing their lines to suit each other. That is a legislative act, and we're not going to be involved in that. But they will stay involved if it's clear that even though you're saying it's for a partisan reason, that what the effect actually is racial discrimination. So again, you cannot use race as the predominant reason, and I thought I would just go ahead, since we're all fairly familiar probably with this example, our own dear local House District number 90. And this was Abbott versus Perez, and this went all the way to the Supreme Court. And this was during the time, you may recall, when the state maps were going crazy. The legislature drew a map, and then that couldn't get that DOJ preclearance that I mentioned, and so the court drew a map, and then the Supreme Court said the court didn't do it right, so the court did it again. I mean, it was just a pretty crazy fiasco throughout that early 2010, 2011 time period. So it ended up going all the way to the Supreme Court, and they said that the final map, that the second map that the courts did was okay, except for our House District number 90 locally. And this is kind of a history of what happened with that district in particular. The legislature increased the district's Latino population to try to make it one of those permissible majority-minority Latino districts, but then it moved Como out of the district. Well, there was strong objection to that. So the legislature moved Como back in, which decreased the Latino population, so they moved more Latinos into the district. Well, as you can clearly see, race was a predominant factor in all of these actions. And so the court said, this is just blatant. It's so clear that race was the reason that this was happening. So it was struck down as being a racially gerrymandered district. So here's what you can use, and these are going to look very familiar to you because they are very similar to what we used in 2011. As Fernando correctly said, equal population, that is a constitutional mandate It's not even really a principle. It probably should have its, you know, its own slide. It's the foundation on which all the other factors are built. So equal population, got to have it. The others, as you all have already had the conversation about, are only things that allow you to deviate from that strict equal population rule. So you don't have to use these, but they are available to you to avail yourselves of if the map needed to be fixed in order to, for example, honor a certain neighborhood boundary, which we did last time. We moved some boundaries to try to make sure entire neighborhoods could stay together in a particular district. But they need to be compact and contiguous. It's allowable to preserve the core of prior districts and the preservation of incumbents, which you've already talked about. But whatever you do, it's got to be consistently applied and non-discriminatory. And then we would ask that it would be specifically justifiable for our ordinance that we're going to end up drafting, because the council, whoever ends up drawing the maps, will have to adopt that map by ordinance, by action of the council. So we will put in that ordinance some of the reasons why the district boundaries were drawn the way that they were. So just as a reminder to you, you've already seen these, but since I showed you what was allowable, I wanted to go ahead and throw these up here again so that you could kind of compare them in your mind again to what we've already used. And I think that Mr. Spino zeroed in precisely on the two that are probably the biggest question marks for this body, which is whether or not you want to do that inside-outside Loop 820 and then also preserving the incumbent-constituent relationship, which will be somewhat difficult when you're adding 2 more districts. It was easier last time. So that is the presentation. I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Ms. Guzman, thank you so much. Mrs. Ayala has to leave for another meeting. Before she does, I think on the scheduling part, we wanted to the October 22nd meeting, and I just wanted to make sure that's on everybody's schedule and if that works for everybody. Because we have the 15th, I believe, Thursday the 15th, but we wanted to move it to the 22nd. And if you would check your calendars and make sure that that's good for you, that would be very helpful. Okay. Great. Thank you, Mr. Yao. Thank you for coming. So, yeah, okay. Any questions, even from our WebEx? Okay, gotcha. We see you. Okay, go ahead, Mr.
Yes.
Espino.
Maybe not today, but another time. Even though Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, was eliminated by the U.S. Supreme Court, there's still a bail-in provision under Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. So at a future task force meeting, can you at least explain to the task force what the bail-in provisions of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act mean? And I'll just tell you my layman's understanding. I am an attorney. I'm not a voting rights expert, but my understanding of that law is, and they try to do this with the state of Texas, and I think that didn't get far enough. But basically, if there's a history of intentional discrimination with voting rights, the courts could still supervise what you do with respect to voting rights. But if you could, in a future presentation, Leann, just kind of explain the bail-in. Thank you.
Great. You know what, I was going to ask the same question. I happened in my previous life been the national interim president of the NAACP, and so voting rights is like sacrosanct to us. And so Sal, we're asking a lot of the same questions.
And Madam Chair, I may have to leave early. I have a 6 o'clock presentation to another group, so I may have to leave here like at 5:50. So my apologies.
So okay, I hear you, Mr. Shore.
Yes, this question can be answered later also, but I will want some clarification at some point between the relationship of communities of interest with racial factors, where we draw the line between what's racial, what's cultural. It just is a little bit unclear to me.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I can certainly delve into that and get you a better answer, but I think the broad answer to that is the courts have said that you can use, I guess maybe the place where it's hard to make a distinction, I think, is they've used the term ethnic. So it's allowable to have a group that shares ethnicity, which is generally, Christina Brooks could do a much better job than I could about those definitions, but that's more of a cultural basis, whereas race, we look more at, it's a biological function and that kind of thing. This is more about what is the culture of that area? Do they share language? Sometimes that can be a community of interest. Do they share certain social constructs and certain social, I keep saying the word culture, but that's what the courts use a lot. So I can definitely delve into that and get you a better answer, but that's a broad overview.
Any other questions? I think what is so good that Ms. Guzman is going to be here with us as a legal representative, and we can always ask her questions, and she'll come up with the great answers. Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions from our task force members? Great. Thank you much. Thank you, Ms. Guzman. We're approaching 6 o'clock, and I know a lot of you, a couple of you said you had to leave. Is it possible, Mr. Costa, if everyone's not here, that at the top of our next meeting, because I think it's very important that the redistricting software, can we do that again so that everybody is in tune, and maybe Tracy and Mr. Allen will be able to join us. As much as we can, I think it's very helpful if we can do these in person, but it's up to you, everyone. So can we go with our demonstration now?
Our folks from ESRI are going to be sharing their screen, I believe is how that's going to work. So I think we're ready for them to jump in.
Yes, we are ready to jump in. Thank you guys so much for taking some time today to take a look at this technology. So I wanted to introduce a few of our folks here, but first, myself, Jacob Blind, account manager for ESRI and for the city. So I've been working now with Fort Worth for probably about the last six months or so, but I am also the lead AM on ESRI side for local government out of our San Antonio regional office, and I actually work with most of the cities and counties up and in the DFW area. But to kind of do a brief little intro, we have Richard and also Aaron here with us, and I will let them do a brief introduction of themselves and let them jump right into the demonstration.
All right, ready. My name is Richard Ledbeater. I'm the State Government Industry Manager for ESRI. And what that means is I'm the chief story collector of all things administrative. That includes mostly includes elections and redistricting. This will be my third redistricting process that I've been involved with. I'll let Aaron introduce himself.
Hi, my name is Aaron Rennick. I support the redistricting solution by automation and testing. Yeah, that's me.
All right. So, Aaron, if you could start the slides. So this is our standard slide deck, and this is how I describe our product. It is a web-based product. It is competent in redistricting. It does all the criteria that redistricting does. Redistricting doesn't have any unique workflows that isn't within core GIS, Geographic Information Technology. That isn't within core GIS technology. What redistricting is are workflows, putting together polygons, collecting data, being able to view attributes, and selecting polygons as you collect up to build. This product, I was instrumental in building this product in a particular way, web-based, for openness, transparency, and citizen engagement. And I know you guys have been talking about those issues a lot, and I will be talking more about it as well. Next slide. This is myself and Aaron. Go ahead, Aaron. Just for you data hounds out there, this is ESRI's demographics. The Census Bureau has 6 chief demographers as well as whole divisions. ESRI has 2 chief demographers, and they're kind of like sommeliers. There's only 200 in the U.S. We do take the data from the Census Bureau, the ACS data, as well as business demographics and data, and do our own population projections. And just for the fun of it, I always run a reapportionment scenario when we do publish our 2020 demographics out there. Texas is not as big as winner as last go around, but you do take three new seats as a state. Next slide, Aaron. We've been involved in redistricting since the 80s. As a company, we were brought into the Department of Justice and the Census Bureau to help them define what became the Tiger File, which is also the genesis of the PL, the public law data that you will be using to do the redistricting. So we were there as data consultants to DOJ and Census Bureau when this was happening in the 80s. And we were very much a part of states that were redistricting on mainframes, big mainframes. And maybe they did 1 or 2 scenarios because it was so costly and so time consuming to run. The 90s brought along workstations. States and local governments used our technology, core technology, to do redistricting, usually customizing their own applications, but core technology is what did it. The 2000s was the fun year. If you hear stories about disruptive technology, that was the disruptive technology for redistricting. All of a sudden, instead of big, expensive systems, you could do it on a competent PC. So you could walk to a big box store, buy a PC, buy redistricting software, which at the time was about $5,000 and $2,000 funds, and do it. My pet story for 2000 was the county of Loudoun, that's outside of DC. It's a second-tier county. Virginia released the data for their federal and state boundaries on a Sunday night. And by Tuesday morning, the Loudoun County Council had 25 redistricting plans submitted by the public waiting for them. Now, the county hadn't even downloaded the data themselves. So that, to me, was a bellwether of people want to be involved. 2010, I described that as almost consumer-level applications, and we'll cover what happened then a little bit later. Next slide, Aaron. This is what, pre-2005, this is what redistricting looked like. Professionals did it, the lawyers that San Antonio is hiring, and the legislators, and that was about it. The public had little or no access to it. 2005 is important because National Conference for State Legislature, NCSL, asked me to come in. The redistrictors wanted to get through. They had just gotten through 2000 and how disruptive PCs were to their practice. They wanted to know what IT was going to bring. So I was talking purely about IT. I'm sorry, and then Aaron, one more slide. And this is the story that I came up with. That IT was to the point of, one more slide, Aaron, I think I'm one back. Yeah, so the IT environment was to the point of, if you remember 2005, that's when Microsoft said, no more hard media, you have to get our software via the web. And oh, by the way, this thing that eventually will become Office 360 will happen, meaning all of your Office and spreadsheet functionality and word processing functionality can be done in a browser. And ESRI, as a developer on Microsoft, had to follow suit. So we announced that, okay, if you need our software, get it from the web. And oh, by the way, this thing like ArcGIS Online will be out, and you'll be able to do GIS in a web browser. So I took that idea and I presented it back to them. And I'd like to say if there had been rocks in the room, I would have been stoned to death. To take applications, even as robust as redistricting is, and put it in a web browser was heresy, especially to the consultants in the room. So this was personally my vision of what could happen by putting the software and data on a cloud whether that's internal to your organization or external. You could deliver the data and software and tools via a web browser. So all the person needed was a competent web browser, which ultimately allowed for collaboration and sharing outside of redistricting committees, outside of legislatures. We spent about 80% of our development on the user interface. We wanted it to be intuitive. We wanted to be able to go through and do it on your own without heavy training burdens. And of course, centralized IT, cost effective. Next slide, Aaron. So we break our product into 3 conceptual areas. The data sources, we talked about that. That will be the census data and any other data the city brings in, which is not necessarily desirable, but people do that. Plan management. Okay, I've got plans. People are making plans on their PCs. How do I make sure they complete a plan? How do I get them the privileges to make a plan? How do I take their plan once they're done with it? And most importantly, and the unique part of the ESRI's redistricting approach is collaboration. Okay, I finished my plan. I want to share it. Or I haven't finished my plan and I want to share it with my group, with my kitchen table exercise, with my advocacy fellows, with my community of interest, and say what they have to say about it. Let them take my plan and start their own, or collaborate via Zoom and work and build a plan together. So that's a major part of our solution. Next slide. As I said, the data sources. One thing I want to point out is that we can work at the county track, block group, block level. But you, as users of the application, can also restrict or use at the county and voting district level. That's what they call VTDs. So you can honor those polygons as whole entities or maybe as the smallest unit of calculation. And it also, because it's on the ESRI platform, you also have access to all of the online data assets that the city has and is quite robust with. So as an example, the state of North Dakota likes to make their state legislative districts based off of watersheds. So that's not a part of the census data whatsoever. So what they do is they bring in a data service by the state of watersheds, and through our tool, you're able to select the census geography to make your districts off of a data layer that exists elsewhere. And Aaron will show that a little bit later. Next slide. Plan management, of course, creation, editing, and review, as well as automatic tools to make sure you create an appropriate plan, meaning no holes, no donuts, no disconnected districts. We check for all of those things. And then publishing and use, both generating hard copy reports and bar chart analysis, as well as exporting to block level plans, which is typically the format you'd give to DOJ if they were still active in that part of the business, but where you can share with others who might not be using your platform. Next slide. And then collaboration, and that's the part that I think is the most important. The ability to share a plan, to create groups of shared, to restrict privileges to those groups. So the city as an entity can create a group that can create a plan and publish back to the city, but not share out to other groups, or however you want to set it up. We spent a lot of attention on what we call the menu, the ribbon that Aaron will be showing you, to make sure it's intuitive and usable. Fundamentally, my mantra to the developers of this was left to right, top to bottom, just like Microsoft. If you go left to right, top to bottom in this application, you'll have made a plan. Next, Aaron. This is the 2 flavors that we offer. I believe the city is interested in the managed cloud service, which means you don't have to fit the bill for the servers and the security of your own hardware. You can use Amazon Cloud and their 10,000 security officers to help you keep the data and the application safe. But fundamentally, they're the same product. The only difference is who or where you run run the service. It has unlimited registrations, meaning not only can your group access it, but you can open this up to citizens and public participation as well. Next slide, Aaron. We currently have a Learn lesson. It's a web-based training that walks you through an exercise. It's locked to the state of Maryland, which was the biggest, smallest state that I could find that had multiple districts that provided for the lesson. It's also my home state, but within a 2-hour adult-centric type of training, you will be competent, you will feel comfortable in using this application. But the use of this application is not dependent on this training by any means. But you can also give this, many universities and community colleges are using this lesson as part of their civics classes, as a lab for Government 101, where the people can get a feel for what it takes to actually make a plan, and plans aren't easy. Next slide. We offered, I think we provided staff a case study for the state of Utah. I call them my poster child on how they did it in 2010. Next slide. In their approach, they used a 3-prong approach. Their back office, what the staff and legislators were using, that was one thing. The ESRI redistricting was used to outreach to the public. They had well over 1,000 registered accounts, people requesting an account and getting on and actually using it. Of that, only 300 odd actually submitted plans, and 270 actually met the criteria of a statewide plan. Staff told me the state has 17 constitutionally required meetings for the redistricting, and staff told me that there's always security in the room. But by the second meeting under using this new system, they did away with security because they found out that they were actually great civic events. They would start with somebody in the room who had made a plan, who had used the application, and staff told me time and time again, the comment was, I started with my community of interest or my county or my city, and I realized I couldn't finish a plan that met the criteria without compromise. And the second comment was, I understand that just because a polygon is weird looking, it's not necessarily a gerrymander, that it has to look funny, one, to meet the DOJ requirements, and two, to meet to be able to build around the communities and where people live. So those two things were from a staff's point of view, one of the two biggest takebacks from this process. Next slide. And with that, if there's any questions, I'll pass it over to Aaron, and we'll just start into a demonstration of the software itself.
And if anybody does actually have any questions throughout the demo or at any point in time, please feel free to interact. We want this to be as back and forth as possible to help everybody get a general understanding of what you're taking a look at.
Okay, take it away.
Hi, so this is the front door to the redistricting solution. So each user will have a unique user ID and logon password. So for this instance, we'll use the Fort Worth admin with password. As soon as we sign on, we'll be introduced to the interface with an open plan form. This form will provide us the opportunity to open any existing plans, any plans that we've created, any plans shared throughout our organizations or with everyone, or any plans that we've opened recently. For this demonstration, we'll create a plan. We'll create that plan using 2 districts just to keep it simple. We'll keep the maximum deviation at 10, which is consistent with what Fort Worth will be using. And we can choose what census year the data that we'll be pulling from is. So we can choose the year 2000, 2010, and then once the 2010 data is released, there'll be a toggle here to access that information. We can choose a source geography, so that can be either state level, county level, or in this instance, we'll be using Fort Worth, so that's the city and town level. And we'll be selecting a data hierarchy of place and block, which is used in the city and town level hierarchy. We're then prompted to select the district color. This is user customizable. There are many colors to choose from, and just to fit your personal tastes. And we can also select the demographics we'd like to work with. So in this form, we can select either all of the standard demographics, or if we want to pick and choose, we can certainly curate that to our specific interests. We can also create a custom variable. So if there are any specific reasons you have a custom use for variables, such as total minus a Hispanic population, you can create that variable here just using an expression. We're immediately prompted to save the plan. So we'll just call this Fort Worth demo. And then we can begin interacting with the user interface. As Rich had explained, this is based on the Microsoft paradigm. So as long as you move top to bottom, left to right, the user will have a complete and legitimate plan to submit. The File tab has many of the same features as you'd find in Microsoft Word, so you have the option to open a new plan, save your plan as a different title, or archive your plan. You can save the plan as a local file that you can later import into the redistricting interface. You can choose to print the plan or print a plan book. A plan book will print the entire citywide, all the districts on a cover sheet, and a separate page for each individual district. If we have a plan we'd like to import, we have different formats where that plan could be imported into, or we can export the plan out as those same files, in addition to an image file or a KML. Next, we have a Learn tab. In 2010, ESRI was approached to provide more organized instructor-led lessons on how to use the redistricting interface. Once we created this Learn tab and people got their hands on it, we actually had no one attend any of those instructor-led courses. This learning interface was not only comprehensive, but user-intuitive enough to not require that more drilled-down training. Within the View tab, we have the option to view the number of districts, or if we decide that we did not add enough, we can add those here on the fly. You'll notice in the attribute table that also updates on the fly, as well as my target deviation, which is going to tell me how many people need to be in each district to keep the districts balanced. We can see the target value for each district, and again, that will update on the fly as I add the number of districts. If we prefer to view the districts as separate lines, we have the option to change that visibility here. And we can also shorten the district names, display their names, or we can show the totals underneath those names, and those will populate once we create districts. When we have a number of districts created, if we need to edit those without actually changing the geometries, we can swap the district names, we can change the district names under the Modify tab, or add additional representatives to a district, or we can choose to join multiple districts. We have the option to view a regional plan, and that will only work if we have, again, districts created. And if we don't like the district window at the bottom, we can move that attribute table to a separate window and get that out of the way. As soon as we close that, it'll jump back down to where it was previously located. In the Create tab, we have the option to modify the demographics. So if we decided we want alternative demographics now, we can add those, and they've automatically been added to the attribute table. We can select by both attributes or by location. The select by location function actually allows you to select by attributes with a spatial filter. So if I only want to choose geometries toward the south of Fort Worth, I can put this as a restrictive barrier where my expression will only apply to geometries in that area. To create a district, we simply have to select our active district in the district drop-down menu. We have individual tools that will help us select those districts. So I can select by using a point, and that's going to select the entire city because I was zoomed out. This gold bar indicates my zoom level, and so if I'm on the right side of this magenta indicator, I'll be looking at the overall place or the overall city limits. If I zoom in below that, we'll begin to see individual blocks. So if I select now and add that to District 2, I'll only be able to add individual blocks by selecting with a point. I can choose to select using a rectangle, or I can draw a preferred boundary using a polygon selection tool. You also have the option to select using a pen tool. For the sake of simplicity, we'll just create 2 districts. So I'll put everything in District 1 initially, and I'll start adding geographies to District 2. As I add blocks, you'll notice that the target deviation, target, and totals will update, as well as the demographic indicators within the attribute table. And my goal here is to balance these districts to where the target deviation is 0. For the sake of time, I've gone ahead and balanced a district previously. So you'll notice that now the target deviation is almost equal. I've got an almost equal population within each district. At this point, I can choose to add additional data. So if I don't know where Fort Worth is, I can add a place indicator where Fort Worth is. It'll show up as a flag. I can also add content. And so since we have a copy of the district layer, I can load in the Fort Worth City Council districts. They'll show up as red outlines. That was instantly added to the map. And then I can add those geographies to a district using a selection tool. So I'll identify from that layer I just brought in. I'll use an identify tool, and I'll select District 3. Make sure the source district will allow me to, and I will add that to District 3. And so that selection was used as basically a clipping tool that assigned all those geometries to District 3. We can select a different base map. So if we prefer a topographic base map, it's as simple as opening that toggle and clicking the desired base map. We can also add themes based on the demographic information we brought in. So just the standard is the universal data set based on the total field. And you'll see that a thematic map will be generated. And I can zoom in and out and see that at different scales what the total population of each block is. In the Review tab, we have the option to view the plan histogram, which is going to show us the total based on our districts. We can change that to reflect total non-Hispanic if we're interested, or any other demographic variable we've added to the plan. We can see the plan distribution. So the overall total population is broken down by percentage. So we have 12.5% in District 3, 40.7, and 46.8 in District 2. Or we can select any other demographic variable similar to the plan histogram. We can also see the district distribution. So I'll select the desired district. The data set that I've entered is standard. If you have a separate data set entered earlier on in the plan creation process, you can select that here. And now we can see the breakdown of these demographics based on the district I have selected. We can run compactness tests. So these compactness tests are approved by the Department of Justice. And if you're unfamiliar with compactness tests and need a refresher, just hover over the title and it's going to give you a succinct summary of how that compactness test is calculated. And most importantly, we're going to see the number of holes in the district. And that's important because when we run our integrity test, it's going to make sure that all of these districts are connected. If we have any holes, we'll be able to go part by part and assign those to the appropriate district. To correct this, you simply select the desired district. So that portion of District 1 needs to go into District 3. I'll select District 3. And click on the geometries that need to be reassigned. And these are popping up because it appears that the data set shows a disconnect in the actual city limits and not a disconnect based on a different district interfering with that connectivity. I've also pre-populated the city council district map. So this is the current council districts for the city of Fort Worth. And when we get to the review step, we can actually review this plan against other submitted plans. So I've pre-populated a comparison plan. And we can see the differences in the districts that are hatched here. So the differences primarily that are all showing up as hatched areas are because the district numbering is different. So if an individual was unfamiliar with the fact that Fort Worth doesn't actually have a District 1, that's the mayor's seat, that's an at-large seat, it will hatcher everything. It does not normalize that based on this map that starts with District 2. If I want to see those specific differences, I can go to the Reports tab, and I can choose to run a detailed comparison report and download that as a PDF. And once that downloads, I'll have a tabular indicator of all the differences in my districts that I created as a user compared to another user's district creation. And we can see the differences described as District 1 from Plan A or District 2 from Plan B. Next, I can choose to share the plan. So I can share that plan out of the redistricting software by either publishing that as a map package, KML, or a feature layer. If I publish it this way, it'll actually go to a ArcGIS online user account. Or if I choose to share it within the redistricting solution, I can share that plan here. I can choose to share that with everyone as a public plan, or if I have an individual subgroup, I can choose that group name here once it's populated. I can control what those users do with the plan by sharing it as a read-only plan, or I can choose to share it as a read-write plan if I'd like someone to put their edits into it. As soon as I share that plan, I can validate that by going back to the File tab, choosing to open the plan, and it's going to show that this plan has been shared as a read-only status, and that I've shared that plan with everyone. If we need to create a group, we can manage our group accounts here. It's as simple as adding a group name and inviting the users that already have user IDs within the redistricting software.
So, Aaron, let me just jump in. Just for clarity, what you're seeing is the administrative side of the application. So the day-to-day users, the people that are just there to make plans, won't necessarily have the manage group, invite groups, edit profile tabs. That's up to you to decide kind of the group profiles, personas, and what commands they can use, what they can see, what they can't see. So all of that is definable or customizable from the onset. We use the concept of a curator, so that would be a staff person who takes the request for logins and accounts, gives them the appropriate privilege based off of who they are and what they're going to do. And then manage the plans as they come back in. So many of these parts, the average user won't see.
If I have an external map I'd like to bring in, such as this Fort Worth 2010-2020 demographic information that highlights 2010 Hispanic population percentages, I can bring that in as a separate layer. All I'll need is the hosted URL. I copy that information, add it here. I can instantly bring that information into my plan. And so now I have a choropleth map indicating the Hispanic population by percentage within the city of Fort Worth. It also shows my district labels above it, and I can add the district lines to see which areas of the city are higher or lower in that specific demographic variable. The final step is to submit the plan. As soon as I submit the plan, it'll run that integrity check. If it passes the integrity check, I can choose to submit the plan. And this plan will be submitted to the curator that Rich referenced earlier. It warns me that once I submit this plan, I can no longer edit it. Choose to submit. It's going to remind me of that again. And my plan has been submitted.
So with that, we'll pause again for questions. Aaron, if you could go back to the slides, I think we just have some closing slides, but otherwise we're still here for questions. The idea of transparency at the tool level was, as I said, not well accepted by the redistricting community at first. They didn't understand that applications were moving in that direction, that they could be offered over a browser. That was to be honest, that was a control issue that many had with our application at first. But as I said, if you Google the word redistricting, you get about 30,000 hits on Google. If you Google the word gerrymandering, you get about 80,000 hits. And that disproportionate tells you something. It tells you that it's a thing. It's a perception. It's an easy word to use. It's an easy word to throw about. It's a hard word to defend against. But it doesn't necessarily mean it happened. But my philosophy, ESRI's philosophy, is that openness and transparency is what can guide this process.
Hey, Richard, have you seen the chat at all? There's one question in there right now.
Yeah, so I read that and I thought it was this tool will be this tool is available now with the 2010 data. It will be the 2020 data is available to the state. It will be available through this application. So, as far as your timeline, I don't know. I'm confused. But it is something that the city, when it does come out, that the city council can do when they are using your direction to draw the plans, but also opens up to everybody within the city to be able to experience this, to make their own plan, for you to come back using your own guidance and make plans to submit to the city for consideration. So yeah, I do not see you using this heavily with new data. You could certainly use it with older data, and just experience it and just start doing load balancing as well using this. So yes, I don't know what the city has planned, but that would be my hope, that you would actually be able to get your fingers wet with this tool. Maybe not the newest data, but you can experience what it takes to draw communities and do some early analysis of where the communities of interest lie.
Thank you.
And next one, Aaron, is at the end. These were the customers that allowed us to use their name from 2010. The city was, your city was one of them. These states and local governments did the same process. They wanted to engage the public. And you could see that everybody from as large as Los Angeles, as spread out as San Bernardino, and others as small as Santa Monica, used software to engage the public. And that was their main goal, is to get them involved into the discussion, not just bystanders to say, which map do you like, A, B, or C? This is how the process was made. This is how the sausage is ground. And I think that's it, Aaron, for the slides. Yeah. So with that, I'll leave it open for any other questions. As you know, we have 3 people on the line that are local. Aaron is in California. I'm in Maryland, but we will make ourselves available after this meeting through the process to explain our knowledge and what can be done and what can't be done. I will, if Michelle is still in the room, I will warn you, you're going to be a busy person.
And there was one other question that came in there regarding the training tools. So I just want to let you guys know, you guys have access to all of the training tools right now. As is, you guys are a current customer of ours, and so that comes with everything that you're already paying for.
The Learn lesson does not require any software to use. You can just have a competent browser, and we ask you to make an account, and you can do the Learn lesson. Mr. Scher? You're on mute.
Yeah, you're on mute.
There we go.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. With the in terms of when we actually get access to the tools, I mean, I think we're going to need to know, maybe have some instructions that says you go to this place, here's where you get the account information. Do we know when we're going? That may be more of a question for the city staffers, but I know that some of us are a lot more comfortable with data sets and GIS and mapping tools and others. I personally, I've dabbled with it. I know how to do some of these things, but for many of us, I suspect it's a little bit baffling at the moment.
Well, I'm one of the baffled ones. May I suggest, colleagues, as we're almost at 2 hours here, no, 2.5 hours, that is it possible, Mr. Costa, that we could have some kind of abbreviated briefing of this? Because we've got 3 or 4 of our colleagues who have already either left the room or dropped off of the.
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead.
With your concurrence, I would suggest that we consider before your next meeting on October 22nd, that we have a special workshop, if you will, for those task force members who had to leave and could not participate in this demonstration, and for any others who may wish to drill deeper into the software and learn how to use it. I would suggest that we consider it would be entirely optional. It would not be an official meeting of the task force, but it'd be a training session. And if you wanted to jump directly into some aspect of the presentation, you could. You wouldn't have to listen to the whole thing. I'm sorry? Yes, we could do it by WebEx, of course. In fact, I think we'd have to because these folks are remote in different parts of the country. Yeah. And so I would suggest, I don't know which staff member would want to take the lead. Michelle will, working with Zach and others, will arrange to at the convenience of our task force members and our friends with ESRI, a workshop specifically on the redistricting software. And we'll do it in advance of your October 22nd meeting. This will be entirely optional. You can perform your duties as a task force members without having any knowledge of the software. This is good for you to know, but it's not essential. You can do a perfectly good job without training on the software. So don't be intimidated by what you're seeing on the screen. You don't have to know this. Okay. This is just icing on the cake, and a tool that citizens can use and council members can use, but the council members themselves can rely on staff that do it for them. So you don't have to do a hands-on. So, but for those who do wish to work on a hands-on, we will be happy to arrange that workshop before your October 22nd meeting.
And Fernando, even though it's a workshop, we will have to post it as a meeting of the task force. They are subject to the Open Meetings Act, and it will have to be posted as a meeting.
Do they have to have a
quorum? Well, that's in case the quorum shows up. So, yeah. We'll work with you on how to get that done. So.
And from actually ESRI side, we are going to be here for you guys throughout this entire process to either put a workshop together or any other virtual session to help get you guys trained up as much as possible. So we're here to ask questions. We're here for anything you may need.
Great.
All right, so we'll post an official meeting notice just in the event that more than half of you show up. But it would not be, aside from that purely legal dimension, it would not be a regular meeting of the task force.
Right. You're good with that, Mr. Shore? Mr. Allen? Okay, great. I see the nod of heads as an agreement. We won't assume anything. We'll work it out, okay? Great.
Thank you, ma'am. We will, by the way, we will be sure to arrange, in addition to the representatives from Austin and San Antonio, I believe that Ms. Guzman agreed to provide a briefing on Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act.
Great.
And that way we won't need to take more of your valuable time on the software at the October 22nd. We'll do that in advance in a separate session.
Committee, can I suggest in the interest of time that if you have any requests for future agenda items, that you let me know or Mr. Costa know so that we can, we can do this by email. Just let us know that if you got any future agenda items, because today we've consumed a whole lot of information. So there's only so much the mind and the bottom can take. We have an agenda item for public presentations, and we said openness and transparency. So do we have any public?
Yes, ma'am, we do. We have 3 individuals that have signed up to address the committee.
3 minutes each.
Yes, and the first is Bruce Miller.
Thank you for this opportunity. I'm a retired physics professor from TCU. I followed the Race and Culture Task Force and their recommendations very carefully. And when the task force recommended the formation of an independent redistricting commission, I started investigating this. There were a group of us that were either on the task force or following it that thought this was an important concept, and we wanted to provide information about it and really to influence the city to reconsider it, to establish an independent commission. So what is an independent commission? It's a nonpartisan group that studies the distribution of people and forms their own recommended set of districts without considering all the communities of interest equally. And so basically the goal of an IRC is to ensure that all populations and interest groups are fairly represented on the council. Okay, is that better? In particular, the creation circumvents the packing and cracking of districts to manipulate the outcome of an election to assure the re-election of council members and artificially maintain the status quo, what we call gerrymandering. Today, Austin is the only Texas city that has an IRC, but it's catching on in other places. The city council pushed back on this concept and did not seriously consider it. A group of us who either served on or followed the Race and Culture Task Force tried to keep it alive. We communicated with folks in Austin who served on their IRC and with Austin city staff who liaised with it. They were very forthcoming and overall spoke highly of the concept and its implementation. Since for most citizens it's a new concept, we created a web page and Facebook page and made presentations at various citizens groups in Fort Worth to introduce the idea. We also had useful exchanges with a few Fort Worth council members and staff members. However, the pandemic effectively shut us down. When recently the city decided overwhelmingly not to pursue an IRC, we went back to the drawing board to consider how the previous city plan could be improved to create a more transparent and engaging process. We created a short documentary which all of you received. um, to review the previous implementation and explain specifically how it could be improved. You also received our web pages, our web page address and Facebook page address, where you can see a lot more information on an independent redistricting council.
Mr. Miller, your 3 minutes is up.
My colleague Byrick Ellison is right here, and he's about to go over what our ideas were.
And that was signed up.
Thank you.
Yes, I will. Yeah. And if you'll give your name out to the council, to the committee.
My name is Byrick Ellis.
You gotta get right on top of that microphone.
Okay, let me start get my clock ready. All right. I'm Byrick Ellison, and I'm with Bruce, and I'm going to use my 3 minutes to discuss something that the city did in the last redistricting cycle that was actually kind of visionary. They invited residents of the city to draw their own maps using the GIS vendor software that the city used to draw maps. And they sent members of the staff out to do training to show people how to use the software and then set them loose. And the upshot was that they got back 9 citizen plans from individuals and from community organizations. There were 3, I'm sorry,
Yeah, hang on a second.
Okay, forget it, I'll just talk ahead. There were 3 plans that came in from the east side. There were a couple of plans from the north side, including the North Fort Worth Alliance Neighborhood Association. The United Hispanic Council turned in 3 plans. Let's advance to page 3. Yeah, that's good right there. And then I said the United Hispanic Council turned in 3 plans, and there was one from the Stop 6 Sunrise Edition Neighborhood Association. There were no plans that came in from the south side residents or residents on the west side. So it was a very self-selected pool of inputs. Let's see, at that point the citizens were done, and the city just took those inputs, took inputs from the city council, and went to work and put together a single integrated plan, which went out to the Justice Department for review under the Voting Rights Act. That's fine. Well, actually, the one before that. All right, good. Well, actually, I'm done with that slide and wasting time. So if you look at the current districts that emerged out of that plan, let's go forward to those maps, the two slides. District 4 is one that stands out as being what happened to my map? There it is. Stands out as one that has some striking similarities to one of the citizens' plans. On the left is the old District 4, on the right is the current District 4, and the citizens' input is on the middle slide, middle map. And except for some smoothing that the staff did, these 2 plans closest to me are identical, same precincts, same boundaries. So the citizens actually did have some impact on our current districts. And that's one of the lessons that you can take away from that last redistricting cycle, is that citizens are eminently capable of taking on this task. They've done it, and at least in this instance. But there are some other lessons that we could learn from that experience as well that could make some improvements. For one thing, we need to increase the representation across the city if citizens are going to do this again. And one big thing that the city can do is to invite these mappers into the same room to work together collaboratively. Because instead of having these independent little maps, they could listen to one another's concerns about local, parochial districts and advocate for their own plans. I think some of these improvements, and they're in your handout, would create a system, a process that is more collaborative, more inclusive, more representational, and I think would be more satisfying to the citizens who participate in this. And I appreciate your taking the time to listen to me. There's more detail in the handout that you have in front of you. Thank you.
And our last person that signed up to speak is Rick Herring, and he was going to be here in person. I don't know if he's arrived. And I didn't see him online, so that's all I had.
Well, we want to thank everybody that offered presentations today, and that's good food for thought. And certainly we have more stuff that we're going to read and go over for our 22nd meeting, and they're going to establish what we're going to look at on our electronic, all of our mapping. And so if there are any other questions, suggestions from our task force members before we adjourn?
Chair, just let the folks that are online, I will be providing copies of all of the handouts that were provided today, so.
Okay, great. Mr. Shore and Mr. Allen, because I know Tracy is off. Anyone else with anything else that you wanted to offer for the good and order? Do we have to have a motion to adjourn? Okay. It's been so moved. Is there a second? It's been properly moved and second. Mr. Rashaw as our seconder. Ladies, we are adjourned. Thank you much. Thank you for your time.
Retail is desired in that area, that 20-foot deep parking space could be converted